That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
May 25th, 1961. President John F. Kennedy said, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before the decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth." 8 years later, July 16th, 1969, Apollo 11 was on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center in Merritt Island, Florida. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was in a race with the Soviet Union to have the first manned lunar landing. The flight crew consisted of 3 people. From left to right, Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Aldrin, Jr. Each crew member had already been on a spaceflight mission, making this only the second all-veteran space crew in history. The Apollo 11 spacecraft itself was also made up of 3 parts: the service module, used for takeoff, the command module, used for re-entry to the Earth, and the lunar module, used for landing on the moon. The insignia was created by Collins, who intended the symbol to represent a peaceful lunar landing by the United States. An eagle was used because it is a national bird, and rather than Roman numerals, the number 11 was used to be better understood around the world. The astronauts neglected to put their names on the patch in order to include everyone that worked toward the lunar landing. Natural colors such as blue and gold were used to border the patch. Thousands of people crowded the highways and beaches surrounding the launch site as millions watched from their home on their television. At 13:32 Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, Apollo 11 launched from pad 39A and was in orbit within 12 minutes. 2 hours, 44 minutes later, and 1.5 revolutions around the Earth after launch, the Stage 3 engine burned for 5 minutes and 48 seconds, pushing the spacecraft into the translunar orbit. Then, the command and service modules separated, and after repositioning, the command module docked with the lunar module. The now combined spacecraft headed towards the moon, and the service module was sent into heliocentric orbit, 4 hours, 40 minutes into the flight. The Sea of Tranquility was the intended landing site because of the flat and smooth characteristics. These characteristics were discovered by the Range 8, the Surveyor 5, and the Lunar Orbiter Mapping spacecraft. July 20th was the day in which they'd make their descent to the moon's surface. At 100 hours, 12 minutes into the flight, Armstrong and Aldrin made one final check inside the lunar module, while Collins inspected the outside for any damage as it protruded before him. At 101 hours, 36 minutes, the lunar module started its descent. The crew noticed they were passing checkpoints 4 seconds early and reported they were long and would land west of their target. Descent engines, providing braking thrusts, fired for 756 seconds until 102 hours, 45 minutes into the mission. The actual touchdown point was 4 miles away from the predicted touchdown point and occurred 1.5 minutes earlier than expected. At 20 hours, 17 minutes, and 40 seconds UTC, the lunar module Eagle touched down on the moon's surface. Aldrin said, "Mode control. Both auto descent engines command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in." Charlie Duke, the capsule communicator, responded with, "We copy you down, Eagle." Almost 4 hours after landing, Armstrong disembarked the capsule and engaged the TV camera to allow for transmission to Earth. 109 hours, 42 minutes after launching, Armstrong, at 2:56:15 seconds UTC, set his left foot on the surface of the moon. Aldrin followed 20 minutes behind, and more than 600 million people on Earth received the broadcast. The surface of the moon was described as very fine-grained and almost like a powder. Armstrong and Aldrin spent 2.5 hours out of the lunar module collecting lunar surface samples. 3 new minerals were discovered by these astronauts. A U.S. flag was planted on the surface of the moon so it could be seen by the camera. Soon after, President Nixon spoke to the crew and called it the most historic phone call ever made from the White House. The crew only spent 2.5 hours on the surface of the moon outside the capsule, but returned with 49 pounds of moon material. At 124 hours, 22 minutes into the mission, the ascent engines fired for 435 seconds. Aldrin noted that as they were taking off, he saw the American flag get blown over by the exhaust. At 128 hours, 3 minutes, the lunar module docked with Columbia with Collins at the controls. Armstrong and Aldrin boarded the command module, and after 4 hours the lunar module detached and remained in orbit. It is said that after a few months the lunar module fell out of orbit and crashed into an unknown location on the moon. On July 23rd, on the return trip, the 3 crew members broadcasted their extreme humility and thankfulness for everyone's hard work and support. July 24th, at 6:51 UTC, the crew touched down in the Pacific Ocean 15 miles from the recovery ship, the USS Hornet. For fear of pathogens from the moon, the astronauts were put in biological isolation garments and later put in 21-day quarantine until given a clean bill of health. On August 13, 1969, the astronauts were presented the Presidential Medal of Freedom and were forever remembered as heroes.